Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called The Young Lady is a Royal Chef. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! Around a large banquet table, a powerful man is sitting on the head with 2 roasted turkeys set before him. One which looks quite appetizing and one which doesn't. He is to try both turkeys to determine which one is best. And it seems the appetizing one was prepared by someone's nephew, and the unappetizing one by the lead character of this story, his granddaughter, Senianna. After trying Senianna's turkey, his face twists into a not-so-promising expression. Nonetheless, to the surprise of everyone present, he finishes his portions of Senianna's turkey, making a bitchy redhead furious at seeing how he's supporting Senianna's dish. A young man suggests the emperor gives a gift to the person who made the tastier turkey, asking him to leave his fork next to the dish he liked more. And surprise, surprise, he leaves his fork next to Senianna's turkey. Senianna thinks back on how she got into that situation. She actually came into this world just 15 days ago, as before she was a common 20-year-old running a restaurant in the modern world. Her father loved gambling and drinking, so when she was 8, he left her in an orphanage where she became extremely close to her teacher. Once she grew up, she opened a restaurant with her teacher. Unfortunately, her teacher died soon after, and as she was returning home from spreading her ashes, she got hit by a truck and died, waking up in this world. The woman she's possessing, Senianna, is the youngest daughter of the Frensif family, the most powerful family in the East. But as her mother was a slave, she was always harassed and mistreated in the palace. She tried unaliving herself, and that's when our girl possessed her body by accident. Because of this, her whole family hated her, and the bitchy redhead from the start, Florietta Meridian, constantly bullied her. We see her forcing Senianna to eat a visibly rotten salmon. But current Senianna won't have this, and instead twists her hand and forces the fish into her mouth. Senianna is being called upon by her grandfather, and she immediately knows it's because of the incident with the rotten fish. As she enters his chambers, she sees not only her grandfather, but also her father and brother and a theatrical Florietta sobbing to them. Her grandfather, Navarius Frensif, is quite an intimidating man. He's the head of the Frensif family, one of the 5 strongest families of the empire, considered to be the rulers of the East. Nefarious means to scold Senianna, as Florietta has victimized herself regarding the fish incident. She tells Senianna she'll forgive her if she were to apologize to her. But Senianna's furious at seeing how Florietta's got everyone around her fingers with her lies. Thus, instead of apologizing, Senianna decides to tell her grandfather the truth. She addresses him as grandfather, causing him to flinch, and tells him if he wants her to, she'll apologize to Florietta as she doesn't want any trouble with him. But first, he should apologize to her for giving in to her lies. She tells them that the poisoned fish was in fact given to her by Florietta, and taken aback by Senianna defending herself for the first time, Florietta admits to it, but lies by saying she didn't know it was spoiled. Senianna counters using logic, telling everyone she also wouldn't have known it was spoiled, so she isn't to blame either. Florietta snaps, yelling that the maids saw it all. But Senianna then shifts the focus of the issue, saying that would mean the maids knew the food was spoiled and decided to serve it to their masters anyhow. With that, Navarius decides to believe Senianna and dismisses an angered Florietta. Realizing how her life is in constant danger living here because of her family's hatred towards her, Senianna decides to stay strong and stand up for herself from then on to survive. Nonetheless, her memory is a bit off, as she still can't recollect everything about the life Senianna had before she possessed her. Therefore, she decides to go look for someone to help her remember. She knows she's been cast to a separate building from the rest of her family, but it is filled with Florietta's people, so it'd be hard to get someone she can trust to help her remember her life. Luckily, she recalls a maid by the name of Citron, who's the only one who stands up to Florietta, so she decides to go look for her. Senianna hears a loud slap, and as she turns a corner, she sees a group of maids huddled around Citron, who's kneeling on the floor with a swollen cheek. She immediately intercedes, demanding to know what's going on there. The head maid of Florietta's castle, Nicole, smugly replies to her that she doesn't need to know. Senianna remembers her. She used to be Florietta's nanny, and once she received her own castle, she moved in with her. She would usually aid Florietta in her plans to torture and abuse Senianna, but this Senianna will have none of it. She furiously replies to Nicole that she must know everything in that building, surprising her a bit. But she continues with her smug attitude, telling her they were training Citron for being impudent and asked Senianna to excuse them some more. However, she's got enough of this, so Senianna strides up to her and begins slapping her hard across her face. She's dismayed, yelling that she'll report this to Florietta, but Senianna doesn't give an F, firing her on the spot. Fuming, she asks the rest of the maids if they want to be fired too, and they all respond no and scuttle away. Now alone with Citron, she helps her up, but Citron seems upset by her. Senianna doesn't understand why, but she recognizes she feels a pleasant feeling when seeing her. In order to understand what she's referring to, Senianna decides to tell her a half-truth and confesses to her that she lost most of her memories after her suicide attempt. This makes Citron break down crying, telling her she wouldn't have done it if they'd run away like she'd suggested. Finally, Senianna starts remembering some things, and she recalls that she pushed Citron away because she was afraid of her kindness, thinking she'd only hurt her like everyone else. So she now takes Citron's hands in her own and apologizes for hurting her. This makes Citron relieved at last, and they go to Senianna's room to keep talking. There, Citron explains to her that it's customary for the second child of nobility to take up culinary school to become a renowned chef in the Imperial Palace, as the head chef has major power and jurisdiction even on imports and exports of food. Senianna is attending culinary school herself, but she was the worst in her class. Now, she's determined to become the best, but it turns out the key to the kitchen she's meant to practice in has been stolen by Florietta in one of her schemes and is being kept by her older brother, Lancelot. Senianna goes to meet her older brother in his study to request the kitchen's key. She notices he's friendlier than she expected him to be, even though Senianna remembered him as a snake. They sit down to have tea together, and Senianna surprises him by asking for the kitchen's key. He tells her it might not be the wisest choice given her relationship with Florietta. At first, Senianna believes Florietta dislikes her because she looks like her mother, which amuses Lancelot and almost makes him pat her on the head, but he stops as he realizes Senianna flinching away. He explains that Florietta dislikes her because she's the main obstacle in her plan to be in charge of the Francif's domestic affairs as head of the household. Florietta is engaged to their father merely due to convenience between the Francif and Mariathan families, so she wants to gain power by being in charge of household affairs. But Senianna's status as daughter of the head of the house may threaten her position. Thus, Florietta may feel threatened by her if she decides to step into the kitchen. With this new information, Senianna tells Lancelot she understands he has nothing to gain by letting her have the key, but she warns him it might not be wise for him to refuse her request, as she'll hold a grudge against him once she oversees the household, telling him this matter is really between him and her. Taken aback, he asks her why she changed so suddenly, and she tells him she realized that nothing in her life would change unless she did. Liking this new version of Senianna, he agrees to give her the key under the condition that she dines with him and their grandfather that evening. Noticing he's holding his hand, Senianna tells him it's okay if he wants to pat her, knowing this will make him like her even more and could be useful in the future. Lancelot escorts Senianna into the dining hall where her grandfather and other brother, Gawain Francif, are already sitting. Gawain doesn't seem pleased to have her there, and Lancelot explains that they were talking when it became dinner time, so she'll be joining them. She doesn't know where to sit as she's never had dinner with them before, but she finally decides to sit next to her grandfather as that seat is vacant. The food arrives and she's delighted with the crab consommé served, as it reminds her a bit of Korean food. But she loses her appetite after seeing how harshly Gawain is glaring at her. Lancelot asks him about their army's campaign against the rebellion, and it seems the man in command of the forces, Genera Cedric, decided to allow a city besides a river to come under siege to lure out the rebels and attack them from behind. However, Senianna notices a huge flaw in their plan, as the rebels are camped out upstream from the river that supplies the city with water for their crops and animals. She expresses this concern of hers to them, telling them that the rebels may poison the river, which will inevitably make the citizens have to leave the city come spring, forcing them to open the gates to the city and giving the rebels an entrance. This alarms Gawain, who stands up and immediately leaves to send the general a message warning him of this possibility. After dinner is done, Lancelot gives Senianna the key to the kitchen, making her radiate with joy. He even offers to become her taster, asking her to share her food with him, which she gladly accepts. She immediately goes to look for Citron to open the kitchen's door with her. Senianna is mesmerized by the kitchen and all the appliances and magical instruments it contains. She spent part of the night cleaning it up with Citron and then went to bed, but she's so excited about it that she can't fall asleep. The very next day, Senianna goes into the kitchen and decides to prepare a spicy fried chicken as her first dish in her new kitchen. She remembers that in her former life, she used to make almost any dish using chicken as it was the cheapest protein she could afford. So she's rather good at preparing it. After she's done cooking it, she tries it and is amazed at how good it turned out. She offers some to Citron, but she's hesitant at first as she's accustomed to the previous Senianna's cooking, which wasn't so good. Nonetheless, she finally accepts to try it and is shocked by how delicious it is. She tells her that she's sure her grandfather will love it, so she decides to take some over to him and to Lancelot. Citron tells her she'll go fetch more delicate plates to serve the chicken in for them, and Senianna decides to go with her as she wants to see if she can find anything to garnish the dish with. Thus, they both leave the chicken unattended for a moment, and once they return, they notice the chicken's gone. In Nevarius's office, Lancelot is reporting to his grandfather that Senianna's suspicions regarding the rebels' plan to poison the river were right, and Gawain informs them that they were able to stop them before they released the poison. Nevarius then orders them to send Calypso to take care of the issue, and the problem now is that they would need to use a portal to get Calypso there in time, so they would need to ask Marquis Savayer to use his portal. But the two families are not in the best of terms. On another note, Nevarius asks Lancelot if he gave Senianna the key to the kitchen, warning him not to waste time and resources on a futile effort. To Lancelot's surprise, it's actually Gawain the one to defend Senianna, suggesting that she's changed and that maybe in her previous attempts at cooking, she wasn't showing off her true skills. Acknowledging she seems different, Nevarius decides to give his granddaughter another shot at cooking. After they leave their grandfather's office, Lancelot expresses his surprise at Gawain after he stood up for Senianna. Gawain acts indifferent, telling him he owes her one and that he truly believes her cooking has improved. And it is then that Lancelot notices a red stain under his lips. Gawain immediately wipes it off and then tells Lancelot he'll pass on lunch as he's already full. Guess we already know who the chicken thief is. Meanwhile, Citron and Senianna are angered because of the missing chicken, but Senianna quickly gets over it and decides to whip up another batch. It's already nighttime by the time it's done, and she decides to go and give some to Lancelot as she previously promised. She takes it up to his room herself, and as she comes in, she notices he's already asleep. Sweetly, she covers him in a blanket, and a comment regarding his beauty slips out of her mouth when she notices he's already awake. Senianna's really flustered at being caught by Lancelot when calling him handsome, which gets even worse when he asks her again if she truly thinks he's attractive. As she confirms her thoughts, he starts laughing, and her embarrassment is so much she stands up and starts to leave. But he grabs her wrist to hold her back. He asks her if she had something to say to him, and she tells him she brought him a dish she made, following the promise she made the day prior. Lancelot's surprised at how good her cooking looks, and she's dazed by him as he thanks her for bringing it to him. She then excuses herself to her room as it's late, and before leaving, tells him the dish is better with beer. While walking back to her room, she bumps into Gawain, who looks down on her with a piercing glare as he questions her about her visit to Lancelot's room. She's terrified by him, but she holds her ground, as she firmly informs him she just went to deliver him some of her cooking. Gawain asks if she has any left over, and confused, she tells him she gave it all to Lancelot. Thus, he orders her to make more. She asks why, and he passes it off as wanting to see if she did anything funny to the food. This enrages her, and she informs him she did nothing weird to the food and simply goes on to her room. Once in her room, she wonders how Gawain knew she'd made fried chicken, and then she realizes the only way he could know is if he was the chicken thief. But she quickly dismisses that idea. Gawain, in fact, turns out to be the chicken thief. He had not intended on finishing all the chicken she had made, but it turned out to be so delicious he couldn't stop himself. Now, that dish is the only thing he can think about, so he enters Lancelot's room, hoping he hadn't finished it all. Nonetheless, he's dismayed to see Lancelot didn't even leave a crumb on his plate. Lancelot tells Gawain he was impressed by how tasty Senianna's dish was, even relaying to him that Senianna told him it would be best with beer, which catches Gawain's attention as he's an avid fan of beer. Lancelot teases him, telling him he could ask Senianna to cook some more for him, but he seems to remember a previous incident with her which has apparently left him feeling hatred towards her. It's then that a butler comes into Lancelot's room to inform him that Florietta is meeting with their grandfather to discuss something related to Senianna's kitchen. They head to his office, where they find Florietta showing off her nephew Andre, who she claims to have graduated the Culinary Academy top of his class. Gawain immediately knows what Florietta's up to, seeing as she clearly wants to make Nevarius stop supporting Senianna's endeavors in the kitchen and shift his focus onto her nephew, given he appears to have a higher chance than Senianna at coveting the Imperial Palace's kitchen. Florietta then asks Nefarious to allow her nephew to prepare a dish for him on his birthday banquet, which he agrees to. Now outside Nefarious' office, Andre asks Florietta why she lied by saying he graduated top of his class when he didn't. And the despicable thing tells him it's no issue, as she can easily change his report card by bribing the headmaster. She explains that he doesn't even need to cook the banquet dish, as she's already hired a professional chef, so all he has to do is play the part. Her goal is make Senianna look bad by having her nephew make a better dish than her, promising to give him everything he wants as long as he plays along. There's a commotion outside of Senianna's kitchen, and Nicole, who is rehired as Florietta's chamber lady, appears to inform them that Florietta's nephew will share the kitchen with her from now on. Citron protests, saying that Florietta doesn't have the authority to impose such an arrangement. But it's no use, as Andre already seems to be inside Senianna's kitchen. Senianna doesn't even pretend to be friendly with clueless Andre, snatching his recipe book from his hands as soon as she enters her kitchen. He protests, telling her he worked for days on those recipes, but she quickly tells him that just as she's sharing her kitchen with him, she expects him to share his recipes with her as well. Florietta steps in, furious, telling her that she's dumb if she doesn't know that a chef's recipes are their most valuable asset, and proceeds to boast to her that her grandfather asked him to make a dish for his birthday banquet, so he'll be borrowing her kitchen for that purpose. Senianna then notices an array of impeccable and high-end kitchen instruments, which clearly belong to Andre, and she proceeds to throw them all onto the ground. Florietta shrieks, but Senianna calmly tells her that she's just following her own advice and making herself useful for her grandfather. She explains that her grandfather has always taught her to defend what is hers and to punish those who try to prey upon her. So she informs her that she's fine with sharing her kitchen with Andre, but they must bear in mind that she won't cooperate at all. Andre is completely terrified, begging Florietta to let him cook somewhere else, but Florietta won't budge and even threatens Senianna for this. Senianna realizes how important this banquet is for her livelihood in the mansion, as if Andre's dish is better than hers, she'll become useless to her grandfather and Florietta may sneak in an assassin to kill her while everyone's focused on her nephew. Thus, she's determined to beat him in the cook-off. She gives roasting a turkey a go, and it's good, but it's not something that will wow her grandfather. So she decides she must get information on what will suit her grandfather's palate. She figures the easiest way to get that information is through one of her brothers, and she decides to try asking Gawain, as she doesn't want to stretch out her newfound friendship with Lancelot. She gets an excuse to go to Gawain's room by taking on a chore of one of the maids, and as soon as she knocks on his door, he pins her to a wall, demanding she gives him the papers she's carrying to him. Senianna's terrified, but she's too smart to not take advantage of the situation, asking him if he'd hit her if she didn't hand over the papers. Senianna's pretty sure Gawain will hit her for disobeying him, remembering how she had to endure such beatings from the loan sharks that came after her father, and even from the director of the orphanage she was in. So she braces herself, thinking that if she just endures the pain, she'll eventually be able to ask him what she wants to know about her grandfather. However, Gawain looks more mortified than her, asking her if she truly thought he'd be the type of man to hit a woman. She smiles, relieved, realizing he might be intimidating, but he's a much better person than she thought he'd be. Thus, she tells him she'll hand over the documents if he tells her what types of food their grandfather likes to eat. Gawain tells her she's been acting suspicious and demands she hands over the papers, but Senianna insists, telling him she needs to know in order to cook something for him on his birthday. This surprises Gawain, and he keeps on prying and questioning her. Senianna doesn't want to answer, so she decides to give up and leave. However, he gives in and tells her Nefarious likes ripened persimmons, which gets her so excited she grabs his wrist to ask him if their grandpa has a sweet tooth. Gawain is really taken aback by this, and he shyly tells her that it's not so much of a sweet tooth, but he's been liking noodles as of recently. Back in her kitchen, Senianna has figured out what to cook for her grandfather, but for that, she needs a key ingredient, which she asks Citron to get for her. Outside her kitchen, both Lancelot and Gawain are eavesdropping on her cooking. Lancelot seems quite content at the new Senianna, thinking back on how she used to be gloomy and unstable all the time, pushing everyone away. He remembers when she first let him pat her, and it gave him the feeling of a feral cat being friendly towards him for the first time. Lancelot argues that it's in the interest of their household to support Senianna, but Gawain is convinced that these endeavors on her behalf will shortly stop and she'll leave things halfway through. Lancelot counters, telling Gawain that it's clear Senianna has changed for the better, and that she's their most effective tool at keeping Florietta and her father, Marquess Maraethan, in check. Florietta has been constantly overstepping her boundaries, and Lancelot seems to think their grandfather won't do anything about it until she does something truly unforgivable. However, she is starting to annoy Lancelot. Apparently, Florietta's father has been sending lots of gifts to some of the France's subjects so as to gain favors for Florietta, as he hopes once she marries their father and produces a child, he'll be able to use his grandkid to wield influence in the France's house. Thus, Lancelot confesses to Gawain that he'll support Senianna as long as she creates her own opportunities. Meanwhile, Florietta and Andre are trying the turkey prepared by the chef she hired to cook for Nefarious' birthday banquet. She finds the dish to her satisfaction and orders the chef to leave an uncooked turkey and leave, as her nephew will take charge of cooking it. Once the turkey is done, Florietta seems happy about how it turned out, while Andre is worried Senianna will be able to prepare something better. Florietta assures him that she's too bad at cooking to make something decent. Nonetheless, she decides it's better to keep her from presenting her dish just in case. Thus, she pays off a maid to put something in Senianna's tea while she's getting ready for the banquet, which she hopes will knock her out for the duration of the banquet. In the banquet, Florietta's rejoicing in the compliments and shoe-licking she's getting from other nobles, as she remembers that before she became engaged to Senianna's father, she used to be made fun of for being a spinster. Florietta then sees the boys arrive, and Gawain reminds her of the first time she met their father, but she tries approaching him, and he angrily takes his arm away from her grasp. Florietta is visibly upset by Gawain's disdain towards her, but what's worse is everyone murmuring around her about his attitude. Marquess Marathon is also annoyed by this. It's time for the banquet to begin, but Senianna hasn't arrived yet, and Florietta's sure her plan worked. She starts playing the part of the involved daughter-in-law, making it seem as though she's worried Senianna didn't show up yet, and making it seem as though she tried persuading her to come, but she refused. Instantly, everyone around them started murmuring awful things about Senianna. However, Florietta's bubble bursts instantly as Senianna emerges pushing a trolley with a dish on it, apologizing for her tardiness. She was apparently late because she had stayed up finishing her dish, so it seems Florietta's plan was a bust from the start. Everyone takes their seat on the main banquet table, and Senianna is surprised to see her grandfather motion for her to sit beside him, a seat that's usually taken by Florietta in her father's absence. Of course, this enrages Florietta, who has to be held back by her own father. She's even more furious after asking Senianna how she got there, to which she simply replied by saying she walked, even though she seems aware of Florietta's original plan. Senianna notices her grandpa doesn't have much of an appetite, but Florietta orders the servants to bring in the turkey her nephew allegedly prepared for him. Once it's presented to Nefarious in all its splendor, Florietta nonchalantly mentions Senianna also prepared something for him, meaning to make her dish appear unimportant. We are taken back to the scene of the beginning of the story, in which Nefarious is presented with two turkeys. One that looks incredibly appetizing, the one supposedly made by Florietta's nephew, and one which doesn't look good at all. We already know that, after trying both, Senianna's grandfather inclined in favor of her dish, leaving everyone flabbergasted. It seems Senianna's dish was spot on in everything, be it texture or taste. It seems she deduced from Gawain's way of describing the persimmons her grandpa likes, sweet and soft rather than ripe, that her grandfather has been suffering from dental pain, and as a consequence of that, hasn't been eating properly. Thus, she used all the tricks in the manual in order to prepare the most tender turkey she could, mixing in some persimmons in the bulgogi sauce so it would adjust best to her grandfather's palate. Senianna is satisfied after seeing her grandfather finish his whole plate, and Lancelot suggests Nefarious fulfills a wish of the winning cook. Obviously choosing Senianna's plate, he hears her request, which turns out to shock everyone present. Senianna openly points at Florietta, claiming she has been repeatedly abusing her, and asks her grandfather to open an investigation into the matter. This obviously upsets Florietta and her father, who immediately stand to protest against Senianna's claims, saying she's lying and trying to slander her. They are outraged, yelling at Nefarious to reprimand Senianna, but Lancelot won't have any of it, clarifying that his sister didn't ask for Florietta to be punished, but actually asked for an investigation. After Marquis Marathon continues yelling in protest, even Gawain steps in, saying that an investigation will clear up any misunderstandings. Finally, Nefarious silences everyone and orders Lancelot to get Heatherwood, a former Imperial palace informer widely known for his honesty, to carry out the investigation. After the banquet is done, Senianna stops Lancelot to ask him to deliver a message to Heatherwood for her. It seems she's captured a witness for him, the maid that tried to slip the contaminated tea to her. As soon as she offered it to her, she had Citron bind her and keep her in the kitchen as she knew it must have been tampered with by Florietta. The maid had told her it had been sent by Lancelot, but she knew it was uncharacteristic of him to send it before the banquet, and to use an annex maid, lenient towards Florietta, to give it to her. The investigation report comes soon after, and after reading it out loud for the Mariathans and his grandkids to hear, Novarius is outraged at Florietta's actions. Senianna chooses the lesser sentence for them, telling her grandfather to cut off their funds and let them starve to death. The next day, Novarius had already ordered for all of his investments on the Mariathans to be taken back, and both Florietta and her father were kicked out of the chateau. The cutting of funds will prove to be a death sentence, as no one will dare lend money to people who are disfavored by Nefarious. As the four of them are having tea together, Senianna tells her brother she's incredibly pleased with her wish, gaining a small smile from Gawain, which instantly turns into a snark as soon as he notices her staring at him. Then, with devilish eyes, Lancelot asks Senianna to tell them the real reason why she's changed. She's not shocked to receive this question, as she knows she hasn't been impersonating Senianna the best way. But right before she can answer anything, she collapses onto the ground. She's dreaming, and she feels herself in her old body as a child, being beaten by her father's old loners. She remembers the fear and pain she felt as a young child, trying to count to 100 to endure the beatings. She's suddenly in her old orphanage playing hide-and-seek, and she remembers the loneliness she felt each time no one would look for her. Luckily, her old teacher, Miss Mia, always came for her eventually. She jumps out and starts running towards her, desperate for her embrace. And when she hugs her, she begs her never to leave her, with tears flowing down her cheeks. Presently, Senianna's passed out in Gawain's room as a physician tells them she's fainted from exhaustion and from being ill. The physician explains to them that she's probably been masking all the symptoms of the illness, saying she seems to have been used to enduring high amounts of pain. They don't believe this at first, as they remember her as someone to complain over trivialities, but as Gawain helps bring her arm up to the bed, they notice it's covered in bruises and scars. Gloomy, realizing what she's been enduring silently all along. There's a knock at the door, and an attendant comes calling for Nefarious as there's a visitor for him. But as he's turning to leave, Senianna grabs his cloak in her sleep and begs for him not to go, telling him she'll be good. By the time Senianna wakes up, it's already dawn, and she's glad she got to rest as she's feeling so much more refreshed than before. Citron immediately comes in, relieved to see her finally up. Citron explains to her that she fainted from exhaustion and ill health, demanding to know why she never said anything to her about her condition. Senianna simply brushes it off, but is terrified after being told she's currently in Gawain's bedroom. She instantly stands up and starts making the bed, fearing he might be mad at her for occupying his bed for the whole night. Citron corrects her, informing her that she's actually been passed out for 3 whole days, leaving her frozen on the spot. Citron finally gets Senianna to calm down and go back to bed, telling her Gawain said it's fine for her to stay there until she recovers, and then gleefully informing that her brothers came to see her every day. However, a few days of her resting go by, and Senianna's doing much better. All of the staff of the annex that worked in favor of Florietta were also kicked out, and Nicole was presently being tortured for having stolen some fundings of the annex. So everything finally seems to be in place. It's time for her to have lunch with her family for the first time in a while, and she's much more relaxed around her grandfather than before, even playfully scolding him for not getting his aching teeth checked out. She then offers to make the steamed turkey for him again, and he seems attracted by the idea, telling her he'll buy the recipe from her so that his chef can make it for him. She's ecstatic, as this is the first time she's got something of her own. And after Lancelot asks, she tells him she'll use the money to buy some shoes, as hers make her feet hurt. They don't understand why, but she confesses that Florietta burnt down her shoes, so she's been wearing her old ones, and everyone turns solemn after realizing how much she's been enduring. It seems Gawain has to receive a punishment for not having foreseen the rebels' plan to poison the river. So Lancelot decided that he had to accompany Senianna as she went shopping for new shoes with her new money. He doesn't seem too excited to be there, and he's walking far too fast for Senianna to be able to keep up. Annoyed, she stops him, protesting that she can't keep up with his pace. He replies angered that he's walking much slower than he usually does, and Senianna snaps back, telling him he's got much longer legs, so his strides are huge compared to hers. He means to talk back, but his jabbering stops as soon as he notices Senianna's bleeding feet from using small shoes. So he simply shuts up and continues walking alongside her at a much slower pace. They soon enter a huge shoe shop, where a rather politically incorrect owner greets them warmly and puts his whole staff to work on getting Senianna the shoes she's looking for. There are 2 shoes that attract her in particular, a cute pink heel and a comfy pair of black flats. Gawain tells her to just get both if she can't decide, but she means to save some of the money she was given, so she finally chooses to get the black flats as they are much more comfortable on her poor swollen and injured feet. After buying the flats, they leave the shop and continue walking across the main street when Senianna notices a cute crepe shop, and she's immediately bewitched by it. Noticing her excitement, Gawain asks her if she wants to go, and with gleaming eyes, she tells him she does. So they go into the shop, which turns out to be a very high-end and highly guarded restaurant. Gawain tells her that he has to take care of some business, so he asks her to just wait there for him, and she tells him it's fine. Way too fixed on figuring out what to order to listen to him properly. Once Gawain's gone, everyone turns their head to gawk at the stunning young man who just entered the shop. The stunning young man approaches Senianna's table, and she's stunned as she doesn't remember him from any of Senianna's memories. He courteously bows to her, and immediately a group of men come up to her bearing a ceramic vase to sell her. She's shocked, remembering how Gawain had warned her of people trying to sell vases at random places. And before the blonde fellow can pitch in a word, Senianna firmly tells him she's not interested, surprising even the attractive man. Noticing how she doesn't want to be disturbed, the men promptly leave Senianna alone. Sometime later, Gawain returns, astonished to see how Senianna managed to finish not one, but 2 crepes in the time he was absent. He pays for the food, and they hastily leave as it's already dark outside. While in the carriage heading back to their mansion, Senianna gazes in marvel at the starry night sky, and is startled by the sudden appearance of Gawain's hand on her head, holding her down as the carriage trembles from the shaky terrain. Once the carriage is more stable, Gawain hands Senianna a shoebox, and she's astonished to see he bought her the pink heels she looked at previously in the shoe shop. She's a bit taken aback by this kind gesture, and she blatantly asks him why he's doing this, confessing she thought he hated her. This surprises Gawain, as he admits he felt it was the other way around, leaving Senianna confused. He tells her he hasn't forgotten about that day, even though Senianna doesn't remember what he's referring to at all. But still, he admits he feels bad for having abandoned her with Florietta all those years. Senianna's surprised but severe on him, telling him what he and the others did to her was neglect, and it was wrong of them. She's learned from her past that for her own sake, she has to eventually be able to forgive her abusers. But it's not something easily done, and she knows she's got to take her time for that. But feeling ready, she accepts Gawain's gift with a smile on her face. As they walk back into the palace, Gawain tells Senianna not to walk alone at night, and she interprets it as him warning her not to get in his way. Frustrated, he tries to explain that he was just worried for her, but after failing to do so, he simply leaves. Senianna's really excited about the pink heels he got her, and as she hurries back to her room to try them on, she bumps into her grandfather, who asks her if the box she's holding contains her new shoes. Afraid he'll take them from her, she glares at him while covering them in her arms, and obviously uninterested in taking her shoes, he tells her to hurry to her room. Once there, she's elated to see how comfy and well the shoes fit her. Later, Citron asks her if she's planning on returning to the Culinary Academy soon, and Senianna's considering it. Her true goal is to be able to open a restaurant or somehow make a living out of cooking, but she knows that before she can leave the palace, she has to be able to gain some seed money for her plans. Meanwhile, her grandpa just finished another plate of Senianna's steamed turkey, amazed at how good and satisfying her recipe is. He finally starts believing that maybe Senianna's changed for good, thinking that her intentions to improve and become useful might be genuine. Thus, he calls for his head chef, Argon, whom he considers to be a great judge of character and has proven himself to be one of the greatest chefs of the Empire. He asks him about Senianna's recipe and is amazed to see how much Argon's praising her ingenuity and skills in cooking, telling him any prestigious chef, including himself, would be glad to have her as an apprentice. Thus, with this in mind, Nefarious later calls Senianna to his office, ready to give her a new challenge. Her grandfather informs her that a guest from the Imperial Palace is visiting them and staying at the chateau, and he apparently isn't fond of seafood. So he orders her to prepare a seafood dish that will leave him amazed. Senianna immediately understands he's trying to test her in some way, but not missing an opportunity to make her plans of owning her own restaurant come true, she asks him that in return he pays for her services, leaving him dumbfounded. She develops her request further, telling him she knows she shouldn't ask for anything and should only yearn to impress him, but she also argues that he should think of it as an employee-employer situation, in which the work done will be much more satisfactory if the employee is well compensated. After some consideration, Nefarious agrees to her request to have access again to her personal property. Sometime later, Senianna is called upon to the main dining hall, where she's shocked to see the gorgeous man who tried to sell her a vase in the crepe shop conversing with her family. Her grandfather introduces him to her as Prince Dominique, leaving Senianna completely appalled at her previous encounter with him, fearing he might tell on her to her grandfather. Thinking further, Senianna remembers the rumors that surrounded Dominique, as he's the bastard child of the Emperor and a saintess and is said to be merciless and heartless in the battlefield. Nevarius orders her to show him the flower fields, and they take a silent walk through them while Senianna struggles to catch up to him. She calls his attention and he stops to wait for her. However, as she's hurrying towards him, her still swollen foot plots against her and makes her trip. Luckily, Dominique catches her mid-air just in time and gazes into her eyes with an intensity that would surely make me faint. She's completely lost in his eyes as she feels him grabbing her tightly around her waist and warning her to be careful. Senianna hastily jumps out of Dominique's arms, thanking him for catching her and for letting the incident of the crepe shop slide, as she knows her grandfather would have been furious if he found out she mistook the Empire's prince for a salesman. An awkward moment of silence passes as Dominique asks her if she wasn't joking back in the crepe shop, making Senianna even more confused. After that, Dominique sighs and excuses himself as he tells her he doesn't wish to bore her anymore. After Senianna stops him from leaving, clarifying that the awkward silence was from them not knowing each other well and not from his self-diagnosed lack of humor, Dominique smiles at her, which leaves her astounded at his beauty. Still, he insists that it may be better for her to leave as he's sure her grandfather aims to get them to marry each other from this simple walk. Senianna already had an idea about this after Nevarius asked her to walk Dominique through the gardens, and also because that time she withheld the documents from Gawain, she actually read them before handing them over, and they detailed the names of the noble houses which offered a daughter to marry Dominique. Dominique then asks her what her strengths are, but she tells him not to worry about what strengths she can bring into a marriage. He takes this as her being confident in her potential as a future wife, but she simply states that it's actually because she has no intentions of marrying him. This answer astounds him, but instead of answering why she doesn't expect to marry him, she just assures herself that things will be fine as long as she does the seafood dish well. Thus, in her kitchen, she's brainstorming ideas that Dominique may like, and Citron gives her an idea of a dish he may like. Next morning, they are all having breakfast together, and everyone is surprised by Senianna taking the seat next to her grandfather. Senianna notices her grandfather not eating anything, thinking his teeth pain must be bad, so she tells the butler to serve him something special, telling Nevarius it's tender and sweet. Senianna instructs her grandpa on how to eat the berries she just gave him, and after seeing him enjoying them, she offers him more, but he declines. And this whole scene makes Lancelot snicker. Senianna then tries paying attention to what Dominique is eating to try to learn as much of his likes as possible. She notices he's eating some grilled eggplant, and she tries it but immediately turns bright red and has a fit of cough as she realizes it's the spiciest thing she's ever had. Lancelot gives her some water to help her get her cough down, and after noticing her reaction to the eggplants, instead of serving himself another, Dominique opts to have some chestnuts boiled in milk, which Senianna is glad about as it'll help bring down the spiciness in her mouth. After breakfast, Senianna returns to her room where Citron gives her some medicine for her still tingling mouth. She's clearly not used to food that's so spicy, as they are not commonly served in the palace. But after noticing this is Dominique's preference and noting that dinner will probably be accompanied with alcohol, Senianna decides to change the menu she had planned to prepare for that night entirely. So, Senianna heads to her kitchen to get working on dinner. There, she finds a mysterious pouch with some white stuff inside and wonders if someone is trying to slip in some more sedatives like before. So, wary about it, she puts it away in a basket. Right before she starts cooking, she's surprised to see Gawain looking at her through her kitchen window. He tells her she looks like a fish as her lips are swollen from the spicy eggplant, then commenting on how she's the ugliest of the three siblings. Senianna responds by saying he's not so handsome himself, telling him Lancelot is much prettier than him, even comparing Lancelot to a prince. Lancelot arrives just in time to hear that, and Senianna reinforces her statement that Lancelot is much more handsome than Gawain, annoying him further. After that hilarious moment, Lancelot gives Senianna some medicine for her upset stomach, and Gawain does the same as apparently Lancelot had originally sent him to give it to her. Noticing that the stomach medicine Gawain and Lancelot just gave her looks quite similar to the powder found in the white pouch she put away earlier, Senianna wonders if maybe someone left stomach medicine for her in her kitchen as well. She has a flashback of a moment right after breakfast in which her grandfather stopped her to give her something, but in the end desisted. So she ponders if maybe he was the one who left the medicine for her in her kitchen. In any case, she brushes off this thought and gets cooking as she has to have the dish ready for supper. As she's cooking, she's being watched by Lancelot and Gawain, who don't fail to comment on her appearance, being it her swollen lips or her small figure, which really makes it hard for her to be able to concentrate properly. In any case, she finishes the dish just in time as Citron comes to take her to get ready for the feast. Before going, she gives Citron a platter of the raw dish ready to be put in the oven and cooked, telling her to take it to the main palace kitchen and tell the chefs there to cut it into 3 portions, just in case any of them get burnt due to the strong oven. Senianna's finally ready for the party and is dressed up in a gorgeous blue dress with her hair and makeup done. As soon as she enters the main room, she's flooded with surprised gazes from everyone, as the old Senianna didn't like to dress up, so everyone's astonished to see her so well prepared. Her brothers come close to her, and Gawain is annoyed by the other guests saying that they are excited to see what Senianna has prepared for the crown prince, even though their tone is clearly fake. However, before Gawain can say anything in protest, Citron approaches Senianna to inform her that all of her dishes have burnt in the kitchen. As soon as she enters the main palace kitchen, she hears the chef who was in charge of cooking the dishes blatantly lie to those around him, saying it's Senianna's fault as she doesn't know how the palace's ovens work, and saying no one had asked him to divide the plate in 3 portions, just in case one of them burnt. Citron tries defending Senianna, but Senianna's more focused on getting something out there for the prince than on the chef's lies. So, she immediately gets to work on preparing something fast, but not without reminding the lying chef that he'll face consequences for his lies. Argon is surprised to see Senianna being the calmer one in the kitchen, as she immediately took charge of the situation and began to cook. Her movements are not refined, but she does cook like someone who's been in charge of a small kitchen for many years. After finishing her dish, Senianna asks Citron to take it to the main dining table. It's served inside a small portable furnace which is not commonly used in the East, so the nobles are not accustomed to seeing it. As soon as the lid is opened, a strong and delicious aroma fills the room, making everyone's mouth water. Citron serves some of the dish to Dominique, who first tries some rice cake coated in the red sauce, and then proceeds to try a meatball. He's most surprised by the latter as he finds it not too meaty nor oily. Senianna asks how he liked the dish and shocks Dominique when telling him that it contains seafood as the meatball is a fish cake, informing him that the dish is called tteokbokki. Surprised by the seafood with a wide smile, he admits that it's delicious. Senianna's gleaming with joy, and it only furthers as she sees all the nobles present enjoy her dish. As the dinner party finally ends, Senianna's walking back to the annex with her brothers. There, Gawain asks her if she's happy about winning the deal she's made with their grandfather, but Senianna plays dumb, telling him she's just happy about Dominique liking her food. Gawain then asks her if she changed her mind about not wanting to marry the prince, and she admits she hasn't, as she thinks he doesn't have the charms to conquer her. This surprises them, as Gawain explains he's the most eligible bachelor in the Empire. However, Senianna surprises them by saying that her brothers are more charming to her, citing Gawain's physique and Lancelot's voice. This really astounds them, who can only laugh and smile in embarrassment. 3 days later, Senianna meets with her grandfather to fulfill his end of the deal. He hands her a property ring, and in it, he's deposited 300,000 finny, which roughly equates to 3 million won. She's shocked to see such a large amount being placed on her name, and she asks her grandpa if the amount is correct. He responds by saying that she's being compensated for playing her part just as Lancelot and Gawain are, so Senianna leaves content. As she's returning to her room, she decides not to run away with the money just yet, as she fears her family will chase her and she'll crush the trust she's worked so hard to build. She then bumps into Lancelot and asks him if he has a rough idea of the price of a shop on the main street, and he tells her it's roughly 200,000 finny. Determined, she informs him she'll meet with a housebroker to find out the cost, and smiling, Lancelot places his hand on her head. This also makes Senianna smile, and after Lancelot asks why, his heart warms from hearing her tell him his hand feels warm to her, so she likes it. Citron and some guards accompany Senianna to the housebroker, who at first tries scamming her into a higher market price. However, after seeing the Francev house emblem, he becomes quite lenient, and Senianna orders him to come back to her with 3 possible properties under 200,000 finny in under a week. After they leave the broker's place, the guards which accompany her inform her that they're glad that she's changed so much, as one of them, named Coriel, tells her her previous attitude looked like she was trying to destroy herself. He also admits that the behavior of her family towards her changed, telling her Gawain himself ordered them to come with her today. Instead of feeling as though her family is worried about her safety, Senianna thinks they want to keep an eye on her as they don't fully trust her yet. So she decides to go back to fully earn their trust. Meanwhile, in the palace, Gawain and Lancelot are talking about Senianna and how their perception of her has changed lately. After asking each other if they like her now, they remember the incident that happened between her and Gawain years prior. It was Gawain's 13th birthday, and Senianna had thrown a cup of tea at Gawain's face. Nonetheless, what hurt Gawain more wasn't the cut to his face, but the things Senianna had said to him, as she reminded him that his mother, the princess, had abandoned him in the Francif palace. Notwithstanding, as soon as he heard about Florietta's abuse towards her, the image he had of her previously went away. Gawain also adds that he's noticed how she behaves around them, as if she was constantly frightened of being hurt by them. Not missing a beat, Gawain also tells Lancelot he's changed his attitude towards Senianna as well, and he admits that he's softer on her as her cuteness is starting to take him over. As he tells Gawain of the time Senianna let him pet her head, Gawain is overcome by jealousy as Senianna never let him do that to her. Lancelot advises him to be friendlier with her so that she opens up to him as well, and Gawain retorts by saying he is being friendlier, as he ordered his guards to look out for her. Senianna returns to the palace and is surprised to be greeted by Gawain, who's looking to hear compliments from her for having lent his guards. Finally, figuring out what he wants, she thanks him for the gesture, and he tries to pat his own back by saying it was good of him to do that. Realizing how it sounds, he tries clearing up what he actually means, but frustratingly fails to do so. So he simply pats her head before leaving. Once inside, Senianna is called by her grandfather to attend a meeting he's having with Commander Cedric, the one who missed the rebel poisoning plan. Once there, Navarius is shocked to learn from Cedric that the reason she rushed home was because she wanted to see him. Navarius becomes flustered after learning Senianna wanted to see him, and the commander takes advantage of this sweet grandfather and granddaughter moment to take his leave, as he previously was being scolded by Navarius for his incompetence. He leaves, and as Navarius tries holding up his cup of tea to his mouth, Senianna notices his hand shaking. She then starts asking him a lot of symptom-related questions, and Navarius is shocked at Senianna's precision when describing some symptoms he's been having. They end up calling for a physician who, after some rudimentary exams, determines that maybe they should do a full body checkup on him. Navarius then asks Senianna how she knew about his illness from his symptoms. In reality, it's because she had a regular customer in her previous life who had high blood pressure and presented the same symptoms as he did, but she just plays it off as having read it from a book. Senianna then learns he's been eating her steamed turkey recipe for almost every meal, and this worries her as it's both salty and sweet, which may worsen his health condition. Thus, she forbids him from having sweet and salty food and offers to take charge of preparing his meals from now on, which must be adapted to his high blood pressure. Navarius agrees and the treatment begins. Aside from making him have a fruit smoothie every day, Senianna is also encouraging him to do more exercise, so they are going for walks together. As they walk this time, she seems to notice her grandfather's tone is more caring, but it quickly changes. He reminds her of Gawain a bit, and she's appalled by her grandpa telling her she takes after himself. Senianna notices her grandfather's leg is shaking from the effort, so she comes closer to him and asks him to hold onto her under the excuse that it's hard for her to walk with heels, even though he knows she's lying. Looking at her grandfather, Senianna realizes he's not the menacing man she thought him to be, but just a lonely old man. Lancelot and Gawain then enter their grandfather's office and are surprised to find Senianna sleeping there, covered in Navarius' coat. He asks them not to disturb her sleep, and then demands to know what advances have been made with regards to using Sevaire's portal. They have agreed to let them use it, but at a very high price. Their grandfather then asks about the Crown Prince, and they report that there haven't been any actions on his behalf. Still, Navarius orders them to keep an eye on him just in case. Senianna then makes the cutest sleeping face and noise, warming up everyone's hearts. Lancelot informs Gawain and his grandfather about the incident in the kitchen prior to serving the food for the prince, letting them know that in fact, the tteokbokki wasn't Senianna's original dish, and she only whipped it up in 20 minutes as a chef had burnt her actual dish. They are both astonished by Senianna's cooking abilities and appalled by the chef's lack of skills. They become furious as they learn how he lied and tried to place the blame for the burnt dish on Senianna. So after hearing that, Gawain and Lancelot immediately excuse themselves. The next day, Citron tells Senianna the lying chef was ambushed and attacked by 3 unknown men, who not only beat him up, but also cut up his lips. After an investigation on him, it turned out he was an evil scum who beat up his kid and blackmailed citizens using the Francif name, so he was immediately let go without severance pay as well. Later on, while sharing a meal with her grandfather, Senianna asks to accompany her grandfather through the palace's secret passage to the carriage that will take him to his medical examination, as she doesn't want him walking that far alone. As they walk, he asks her if she's not afraid of returning there alone, but she says it's fine as there are other things she's scared of, like leather belts, which makes him wonder if she was hit by Florietta with a belt. They finally arrive at the carriage, and before leaving, Nevarius sweetly gives Senianna his scarf. Just after he leaves, Senianna is ambushed from behind and her mouth is covered by a huge hand. She panics, but she soon recognizes the voice of the owner of the hand as Prince Dominique's. Dominique's actually saving her by hiding her from some hooded men that are lurking in the shadows. Senianna figures they must be spies that are targeting the Francif house, so she's thankful for Dominique's help as she fears what they would have done to her if they found her alone. After they're gone, Senianna thanks him for saving her, even though he asks her why she's not wary of him as well. She confesses his attitude is suspicious, but she knows he wouldn't have done anything to her, as it would have been too obvious he would be the main suspect, for he is the only guest staying at the house Francif. All of this smart reasoning surprises Dominique, and Senianna soon notices blood coming down from his arm. She hastily takes it in her hands and wraps a cloth around his wound, telling him to go back inside and seek medical help from the chateau's medics. He asks her why she trusts him so much to let him back inside, and she simply tells him that for that day, she'll consider him her savior and nothing else. She then accidentally touches a bracelet Dominique has and instantly feels dizzy. After getting a hold of herself, Dominique comes closer to her, asking her if she still considers him to not have enough charm for her, taking her cheek in his hand. Back in her room, Senianna's discolored and really fatigued. She notices she's been feeling this way since touching Dominique's bracelet, and wonders if his behavior was an attempt to use his good looks to prevent her from telling about their encounter to her grandfather. A letter from the broker finally arrives, and he tells her he found a shop right next to the opera, which is 4 stories high and in her budget. The only condition from the seller is that they meet in person. So, won over by her curiosity, she agrees to go after taking a walk with her grandfather. During their walk, they bump into her brothers, and Senianna asks them to join them in their walk. Due to his pride, Nevarius walks in front of everyone as he doesn't want the boys to learn of his health condition, and the siblings have an amusing discussion as to who is the prettiest amongst them. The conclusion of that talk being that none of the brothers come close in handsomeness as their father and grandfather in their youth. After the walk, Senianna hops into a carriage and heads towards the meeting with the broker and the property owner. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!